Hi, welcome to PNB is Listening. My name is Miles Pertl, and I am a dancer with Pacific Northwest Ballet.
And I'm Sydney M. Pertl, a classical figure artist. Together, we form a brother and sister artistic team called SeaPertls Productions, a subsidiary of Damfino Arts, a nonprofit whose mission is to create new and interesting artworks and empower local artists within our community.
A few months ago, PNB asked us to start a conversation with local BIPOC and LGBTQ artists about their artwork, as well as their insights and perspectives on the social justice movements we are all witnessing today. We reached out to 5 artists who participated or showed work in our Skid Row Gallery show, which ran in conjunction with PNB's Locally Sourced program in November of 2019. We recorded 5 individual artist interviews as well as this group conversation, and all will be available through PNB or on our website, SeaPertls.com.
The artists on the panel are AshaAung Helmstetter, an incredible figure and portrait painter, Collyer, an amazing photographer and photojournalist, and St. Rivera, a wonderful artist, activist, and local gallery curator. Throughout this video, we will be discussing social justice, including issues of race and identity and their impact on their artworks, the importance of representation within the arts, their insights into the recent social justice movements, how best to find and support local BIPOC artists, how to have discussions about race, and how to best educate yourself and those around you. We conducted individual artist interviews which focused on their artwork, art careers, and worldviews, and we highly encourage you to watch those interviews to learn more about these absolutely phenomenal artists.
This conversation was recorded on the evening of November 7th, which happened to be the day that Biden was declared the winner of the presidential election. Please keep in mind we are all experiencing this day in our own ways. We are extremely grateful that these 3 artists were able to join us on such a busy and momentous day. We hope that you find this conversation as enlightening as we do.
Hi, welcome to PNB is Listening. Today, SeaPertls, which is a company comprised of me and my brother, Miles Pertl, are having a conversation with some incredible, wonderful local artists. Namely, take it away, guys.
How about Shamika? Why don't you go first?
Hi, my name is Shamika Taisha Rivera. I go by St. Rivera. I am an artist currently based in White Center, Washington, which is in Seattle, of course. And I make a lot of ink art. That's like my primary medium, and was born and raised in New York, in the Bronx. I like to call myself a New Yorican, and I'm here in Seattle working with you. That's all I got. Cut at any point.
I love New Yorican. That is fantastic. Asha?
I can't take credit for that.
Fair enough.
Hi, my name is AshaAung Helmstetter. I am also an artist. I am mostly an oil painter who focuses on portraits, and I am based in the Central District, Seattle. I love to paint.
Nailed it.
And Chloe, how about you?
Hello, I'm Chloe Collyer. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a 5th generation Seattle resident living on stolen Duwamish land. And I feel very connected. My family is mostly from West Seattle, but I also am connected to the Central District where I went to school and have worked and lived most of my adult life. So shout out the CD. My medium is photography. I'm a photojournalist. And I also teach photography to young people. Right now, I teach the ages 10 to 15. But then we also do student government that goes up to 18. So I also run the student government at the Coyote Central where I teach. And yeah, I'm just really passionate about the intersection of like storytelling and young people, which brings me to my current project, which is documenting youth activism in Seattle, the Seattle area. So I've been doing that for the past 4 years, and hopefully that project is kind of currently coming to a culmination right now. So that's my current project and passions. Thanks for having me. I'm gonna cut my pizza now.
I feel like I could have said more now.
Would you like to say more? You can say more.
I also grew up in the Central District, and I like went to Coyote Central and stuff in middle school. So whatever. I was right down the street. I was like 5 blocks away from Coyote Central. I could walk there. Yeah, so same area.
Well, awesome. Well, I'm so glad you guys are all here to talk with us and have a conversation. Today's conversation is going to be about, identity and how it affects your artwork and how it affects the Seattle art scene and you in the Seattle art scene. And basically just what Seattle can do to do better. How can we make people more visible? How can we get artists work out there and publicly accessible to all? So if anybody wants to start off about how maybe your identity affects your artwork, or what you're looking for when you're showing your work.
I just want to say one thing that came to mind with that, which is representation, which is kind of a golden word. I feel like when we're having these conversations. So when I was growing up, and this is coming from someone who is very light-skinned and white passing half the time, but I am half Black and half white. That's my racial identity. And I never saw people, I didn't feel like I saw people who looked like me in media. And that was so, it was just a huge challenge to overcome for self-confidence and so many, just confidence in general. So, showing people's art, showing art from different walks of life is so important, and representing, actually showing Black, Brown, Indigenous bodies in art is so important, because it's just something that the young people need to see, no matter how old they are, but especially for young people. So that's just one, that was my first reaction to that, is I'm trying to represent my culture in art, because I didn't see my culture growing up, and that is like brown, natural hair, queer, gender nonconforming. Like, these are the things I didn't even know there was a community for until the internet existed, right? So art should have been showing those things way, and it just wasn't put on a pedestal, right? Like, we have historically loved us some European art, and it's time to turn the page over to some more diversity in art. So take it away, conversation.
Like, for me, I have a very similar experience to Chloe, but like growing up in New York and being of Puerto Rican descent, New York, especially New York City, the Bronx, has a really big Puerto Rican culture, Puerto Rican presence, and just presence from everywhere in New York City, but especially the Caribbean. And so I saw a lot of people. My family is like multiracial. I saw a lot of people who looked like me, but I didn't really, the concept of race and my art and all of that really didn't come into effect until I moved here, because it's here where my art practice really kind of started to blossom and become what it is now. And so one of the biggest things for me, moving from a place that is very diverse, multicultural, multi-ethnic, and then coming out here where it's very binary, it was shocking. And it was really hard because people didn't know, a lot of people didn't know what a Puerto Rican was. Didn't know, I had to like explain where Puerto Rico was, what it means to be Puerto Rican. And, people would assume, a lot of the people that I met, their only interactions with the Latinx community was with people of Mexican descent or Honduran, Peruvian, so Central Americans. So like, I looked up the demographics, and I realized that like Puerto Ricans are maybe less than 1% or 2% of the population. And so it was really hard to move out here and, you know, realize that a lot of people didn't understand why I look the way I look, why I am saying, no, there are other Latinx people out there. There are other Latino people out there, Latina people out there. We come in all different, you know, shades. And I think we're seeing that too with this election, you know, which we can or cannot go into. But that has pushed me to go bring it back to the artwork. That has pushed me to go back to my culture and learn more about it. And like really, when I can, and when I really, because it's hard to like go through this learning process, you know, put out there in my work pieces of my culture, you know, pieces that show like, hey, we are not a monolith, and white people, you need to get yourself together and realize that, you know, that not all Latinos, not all Latinx people are the same. And if I can do that with my artwork, I will do that. So one of the things I started doing was naming my pieces in Spanish and only in Spanish, and like not translating them. Because when you look on a map and you look at, you know, what is the most popular language, you know, after English, it's Spanish. Like we're number 2, you know, the US is number 2 in terms of Spanish speakers. So, you know, I name my stuff in Spanish to kind of give my viewer or the audience that like doubt, like, oh, I don't understand that, you know, just so they can like know what it's like to be around be around in someplace new, someplace uncomfortable and not understand. Which I don't know, I guess that's me being a little maniacal, but, you know, but I started doing that. You know, I have pieces that are about, you know, Puerto Ricans in the United States, you know, like specifically with the Young Lords Party. So like some of my work, it touches on that, and I want to do more, and I want to, you know, really explore that more. But I found myself, I don't want to say needing to prove myself, because that's not it. It's just like, this is who I am, you know, binary Seattle, get ready. Because like you need to recognize that our country is diversifying every day. The second, I think it's the fastest growing demographic is the Latinx community. So like we're coming up and we're going to say things, and our art's going to show it, our music's going to show it, our politics are going to show it. And I feel like that really started for me when I was here, because of how like, it's not violent, just how tense this city made me feel, not looking like I'm white or Black, but being from a culture and from a community that it was heavily affected by enslavement, heavily affected by, you know, rape and colonization. And I am the product of that. And so you looking at me and looking at my artwork, you're going to recognize that, and you're going to accept that. So, yeah.
For me, both of what you guys both said, I can resonate with in different ways. Obviously, I'm not from New York. I'm from Seattle, but there's still definitely, I mean, the alienating, it just started when I was born instead of when I moved here later on. But really, for me, in painting, I loved going to art museums all through growing up, and I'm really, really interested in old European techniques. That was something that, like, for me as a kid, old European portraiture was like, whoa, that's so exciting. But the way that I didn't see myself in any of it in one hand, and then when I was seeing pieces of old European art where there were Black people and there were brown people, it's like there's one that's in the Seattle Art Museum. It's like picture of African's head. and then it's like this old thing, you don't know who the guy is. It doesn't talk about who the model is. It talks about the artist, and that happens sometimes where you hear more about the artist. Obviously we want to be talked about sometimes or something, and it's like it's more about the paint and less about whatever. But you know, surrounded by pictures where it's like, this is a portrait of Marie da 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 da, portrait of an African head, like it feels weird. And so then becoming a portrait painter myself, I'm like, all right, there are specific things throughout history that we're shying away from in painting. People are made to look slimmer or made to have more Eurocentric features. And I am just in love with how humans look naturally. Anybody, I just think it's fantastic. And I think that I love exaggerated features. So finding what's unique in someone and exaggerating that is super duper interesting to me. So being able to do that, not just with white people, but with brown people. So already taking that concept of, like, you know, accentuating or exaggerating what you like in a painting or in a person or what you think is right, but instead like exaggerating what you think is lifting this character that you're seeing in front of you. And so that is really how I've like connected my paintings. That's really a spot where I've taken my paintings and gone, all right, this is what we're changing. We're keeping some things the same. There's obviously like lots of artists. Kehinde Wiley did, just when his exhibit came to Seattle, and he was like doing all of these portraits of Black people, still kind of in a European style. And I'm not trying to, I know there's lots of art from all over the world, but what was I exposed to first? I was exposed to a lot of European art. So it's not even that is like my go-to, my grab, my gold, you know, it's just that it's what I saw a lot of first. And I was like, this is the kind of changes I want to make. This is what I would rather see. And this is what I initially have an idea of what is. And that's all I really knew at the time. So being able to expand from that and try different things was huge. And in being able to put my identity a little bit into the work that I do, or even just putting the identities of my subjects into the work, because it's just so important to see more than just one type of portrait. There's so many types of portraits. There are so many different types of styles, so you can take that and expand it and like paint different types of people also. So that was just a place where we're really underrepresented through history. History is a place where we're underrepresented, or a history where that is massively taught and mainstream. So we are brown painters, brown artists, Black people have existed. It's just about making the work to make that history be in the books eventually at some point. So that's something that I try with my art and is important to me.
That's a really fantastic point, Asha, of literally just what is in the museum and what exposure the general populace gets to see of art. I need to think about that a little bit more before I ask a question about it. So give me a second. The question that I'm a little bit curious about, and that's mainly because today's a day where the new president-elect got announced. I'm looking back on the last 4 years, and I spent a lot of time thinking about what's happened in these last 4 years. And so the first two things that immediately came to my head were some of these social justice movements. In particular, the Me Too movement, which came, I think, 2017 in full force. And then just this summer, the Black Lives Matter movement re-popped up and really made a strong impact. I guess I would like to just hear a little bit about your thoughts about the progress that's been made in the last 4 years and what can be done as we go forward, because there's still lots that needs to be done.
I was just on the phone with my mom this morning for like 7 hours. But this morning at the beginning of our call, it started obviously because we heard an announcement that was kind of big. And so we were talking about Joe Biden. We're talking about the Me Too movement. We're talking about how, you know, even someone who isn't Trump isn't necessarily innocent, and how little something can seem to one person, how big it can seem to another person, and how really you're feeling at the end of the day, whatever you're feeling, like no one else can take that. And we were talking, we were like reading off a list of women who had talked about things that Joe Biden has done that have made them uncomfortable, and things, you know, touching foreheads and a stroke on the back and all of these things. And I was like, Mom, these are kinds of things that that were super normalized growing up. Like, you know, yeah, they make you uncomfortable, but you take it because they're being nice. Like, this is sort of the first thing that you're taught. And so it's really a conversation. I teach also, but I teach younger kids. And it's a conversation that starts when you're really, really small, and that we can be having with this next generation, and whatever we can do through art because media is what's teaching us everything that the humans that we know aren't teaching us. And they're amplifying what we hear in person. So when we have media that is saying certain things are okay, then you feel like those things are okay. Or when they feel like they're not okay to you, you're like, but that said it was okay. So as a teacher, for me, it's teaching the kids, all right, this is what it really actually doesn't matter as you, the perpetrator. It doesn't matter what you think is okay. It's actually more about who you did something to. And so, I mean, in our art, when we make pieces where we talk about what makes us uncomfortable, or we be really clear about our own feelings, and I think art is a great way to validate your own feelings. I think that, you know, lots of people, this is not something I'm personally doing right now, so I'm not trying to take credit for this, but making pieces about personal experiences that have been difficult or hard or bad. I have thus far not done that so much, but really even any kind of expressing yourself and expressing your own honest truth makes honesty feel more valid, like as this, to have several different opinions and several different voices and not just one idea of what's okay. When you learn what's okay for different people, and then you learn, oh, what's okay is not okay for most people. Actually, maybe it wasn't okay to start with. The media, and art is media, is a huge factor in teaching to young people who are most likely going to be better at this than all of us now, and better than the generation before us and whatever, but even, you know, better than we are. Feeding them good media that teaches them that they can stand their own and their feelings are valid, and how they react to things, how they react to pain is not something to be ashamed of. It's something that they can talk about. And that, I just feel that really, really strongly.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say something about the different kind of movements and uprisings that have happened over the past. I mean, I guess you could use like the beginning of Black Lives Matter movement as a mile marker for that. But I've definitely been, I had a very political upbringing. I had a like vegan vegetarian mom, and that made me start thinking about like the food industry. I remember being in 6th grade and like protesting our milk should be organic in Seattle public schools. So I'm a very good, like, I was raised a very good Seattle liberal, like very traditional Seattle upbringing. I feel like, I mean, you can look at the numbers, like it's a very liberal city. It's no surprise there. But now, like being a journalist as an adult, there's this question of bias when you're working in journalism. And it's just a really interesting line to like tightrope across of like, how much are you bringing in your own like bias. Like I'm not allowed to like I go to the protests every week and I'm not allowed to chant. I'm not allowed to agree with them. I'm not allowed to like nod my head in agreement. And so it's very surreal having to like, on one end, I've been part of the movements and the uprisings just because I've been present and documenting for so long. But on the other hand, I've been separate from it for the past 5 years because just from a bias standpoint, I'm there as an observer. Like, for example, the legal observers, if you've ever been to a protest, there's often like lawyers guilds, people there. They wear like fluorescent clothing. They don't speak to anyone. Like, if you engage with them, they have to make the choice to not engage emotionally. So it's just a very interesting career that I find myself in, and kind of ironic because I had a very politically active upbringing, and now it's the flip side where I really need to be unbiased and kind of see like and consider both sides at all times, and all sides. Talking about the binary, more than both sides, all sides. Yeah, so that's just something that's been very interesting to me. And like just to bring it back to like what I'm working on right now, like when March for Our Lives happened, which is like the reaction to the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas like school shooting, and then all these students got really politically active, and I found people to be very surprised by what was happening with the politically active young people. And I was like, not surprised. I was like, yeah, that's what young people do. They're out there mobilizing. I've seen it. I've been there. I've been part of it. So that juxtaposition of seeing surprise in other people's eyes when in my community seemed my upbringing, that was a very normal thing to see. So, that's when I knew I needed to start documenting what was going on in Seattle and in the youth communities, because yeah, it wasn't surprising to me, but other people found it shocking. So yeah, such an honor to like be documenting the uprisings. And yeah, could talk about it forever, but I don't know. Shamika, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, a little bit to what Asha said with, making artwork that is therapeutic and telling your truth. With my series Allies and Demons, with the portraits that I did, I touched on that. And I remember when I, showed it, at least like 2 or 3 of them at this gallery, one of the board members said, well, I don't get it. Why did you choose to draw men? And he's like, why didn't you do women? And I said, well, if you're familiar with my work, which you should, because you've seen it before, I've done women. Like I've painted women, I've drawn women. Like that's not what this is about. I said, how many times have you seen men, depicted in a portrait where you're, not showing them as, conquerors or, like this, I don't want to say positive, but just like in this elevated position, like the portraits that I did, one of them is a decapitated clown. I killed this clown, and I'm making this statement of like toxic masculinity needs to be done, and, painting them in a way where it's, these are individuals that I've had great relationships with, but these are also individuals that, have affected me, whether mentally, sexually assaulted me, done something to me or to other women, and that needs to be put out there, and it is painful to put that out there. And I don't always talk about that series in that way because it's still something that I am working through. But I do think that more people, if they can, should tell their story in the form of artwork, because then it validates all those other feelings that other people are experiencing that they haven't had the opportunity to come to terms with, whether it's, domestic violence, sexual assault, I think the Me Too movement also leaves out other aspects of that movement. So like in the queer community, what that Me Too movement looks like, in the trans community, what that Me Too movement looks like. And I feel like if artists can find a way, if they've experienced it, or even if they didn't experience it, if they just can find a way to put that message out there, it can give someone else the strength to get the help they need to speak out, against their abusers. And I do think that this Me Too movement has at least made me feel more empowered and given myself the kind of grace that I didn't necessarily give myself, you know, long time ago. And yeah, I feel like art is very therapeutic, and it's also important to put out there so other people can see and know that they're not alone. And the same thing with BLM, but specifically when you thought about that, I thought about how that gentleman just, he seems so uncomfortable. He seemed so uncomfortable to like be, it wasn't even him, but like to see him, a man in the spotlight, and not necessarily in a good, you know, not in a good way. And I think that's good. I think more people should feel uncomfortable. You know, that I feel like if art doesn't make you feel a certain way, whether it's good or bad or uncomfortable, then is it doing its job? But that's just me.
That, yeah, I agree with, yeah, that, yes. But on the line of uncomfort, normalizing it, making art about things that people are uncomfortable with normalizes the idea that things can be different, or that the mainstream isn't all that there is. And it kind of goes back to that first question. I mean, I'll talk to folks about, with the museum thing, it just reminded me of this. I'll talk to specifically mostly white folks who see these, you know, pieces in the museum. They're like, well, you know, it's not up there because it wasn't made. And I'm like, actually, you know, it's lack of representation. And, you know, people who are, it's so good that you're telling these stories, because if you made that man uncomfortable, now his eyes, he's thinking about this in a way where he hasn't thought about it before. He's seeing people, he's seeing feelings, he's seeing validation that he hasn't seen before. And so by making art that is telling your story, by making art that has Black people in it, making art that has brown people in it, we're not only validating ourselves, but also showing the mainstream that we've been here the whole time. So yeah, I know that like is kind of the first question, but also your response reminded me of, or like, you know, triggered that thought.
And just to even add on to that, you know, that when we are in those paintings, we are never put in a regal light. Mm-hmm. You know, yeah. So you know, who is telling that story? You know, who was the person who painted that? You know, oftentimes, you know, we're, you know, in a shadow, or, you know, like taking care of a baby, or just like in this position of servitude. And yeah, so it's like, I just get so upset, because I too love all the European, you know, paintings, but you know, a lot of them, they went to Africa. Mm-hmm. They got their techniques from African artisans and painters, and then they brought it back. Exactly, they brought it back, and now it's a masterpiece, and it gets studied and honored. Right there with you, Asha.
Same, furthering what you, okay, so this morning I was on Instagram, and I saw I follow a few different things that show me old slave pictures, because I do, and, you know, they have stories about like interviews and accounts of things that went down. And I saw this picture this morning. I cannot remember who posted it. I'm so sorry. It was far in my feed now. But it was a picture of slaves working on a plantation. And there was a white dude, master guy in the picture with his dog. And the description said, this picture was most likely staged by the artist to make this guy, master guy. I really hate calling anyone master, but make this guy look powerful to show his wealth. And so you are seeing how a white artist was depicting Black people in history. Oh, we were there. But specifically making this candid looking shot of slaves working on the plantation, and the master kind of, look what I got kind of thing. So even when we do have representation, it's the same thing. I mean, like, yes, going to Africa, getting techniques, and then coming back, or while you're there, using the techniques you learn in Africa to paint the African head, or come home and paint a picture of the nanny with the white child, or use your photography skills to pose a picture of a master, a white master in all his powers. So kind of taking us being artists now and say, hey, that ain't the whole thing. You know, we can do other things. It like all comes together. Everything, all of the questions are the same. We can talk forever until we're all just, you know, answering every question.
I guess absolutely. I 100% hear what you're saying. And I certainly, you know, as somebody who trained as a classical artist and as a 19th century art historian, the depictions of Black people in classical painting is abhorrent. You know, there's the, you know, Olympia, you know, reclining on the sofa, and there's a Black lady holding flowers. And while you're talking, you know, I'm trying to think of any kind of painting that has a central, like, heroic Black figure in 19th century art, and I'm having a very, very hard time thinking about anything really that where there's any kind of representation. I guess my question is now, in modern times, looking around at our art communities here in America or abroad, what are you seeing in the fine art world right now? Like, are you seeing more representation? I think clearly there needs to be more. And how do we go about doing that, do you think?
I think that you now, with the internet, can see what you want to see. I recently have committed to not watching any movies or TV shows that don't have brown people who either die in the first 5 minutes or are just there to like make the white person succeed. And it's been really, really hard. My list of shows that I watch has gone down. I'm missing comedies, I'm missing movies, and I'm just like, hey, if you're not even auditioning people who look like me just because they look like me, then I'm not gonna, you know, keep giving you stuff and whatever. But with my feed on Instagram or my whatever I'm looking through art for, I just find people. You can find people. It's really easy now because everyone uses hashtags. If you want to find a specific type of art, I mean, people are probably not going to look up hashtag white made art. If you're looking that up, then maybe this whole panel isn't for you to be watching right now, or maybe it really is for you to be watching right now, right? But if you look up hashtag Black art, I know that I don't tag my things Black art. I'm hoping that people just find it, but I definitely look through that. It's about meeting people, searching for the right things, deciding that you're not going to follow people. Like when you're picking who to follow on Instagram, or you're looking through someone's website because you're like looking to buy art. Let's say you're looking to buy art and you're like, I want to buy art from a cool artist. I'm going to look through this person's website, and you look through their whole website. And even if maybe they're a white person and you're like, they seem cool, maybe they're a Black person, whatever, you look through their whole website and you're like, wow, this person doesn't paint any brown people, or this person only depicts there's no diversity in this. Then you're like, all right, that's not what I'm looking for, right? There are hashtags you can look up. Hashtag Black art, hashtag artists of color, hashtag support POC art. Like, you can do that. Anybody can do that now. It's so fancy technology, but really just when you're picking who you want to buy art from, see who they're supporting. And then when you find one that you like, look through who they follow, because if they're doing something you like, they're probably watching other people who they like what they see also, and you're probably going to like that too. So I think that's probably the best way to do it. You really got to look, because we're everywhere. Brown people, Black people are everywhere. And I keep saying brown people, Black people, because I mean both sections, but also I don't know which one to identify as, because I've been called both. So y'all let me know, or don't. I understand I'm not white. And that's as far as I've gotten. Anywho.
Yes to all of that, Asha, even the last bit. Even that last bit. Yeah, I have a hard time trusting anyone who says they can't tap in or they can't find artists of color. I immediately start questioning everything about them. because it is that easy. Like, even if you don't have Instagram, like, like even if you're like, oh, I'm too old for Instagram, or I don't get Instagram, like it's not that hard. There are museums there are museums out there that only have people of the diaspora, the African diaspora, that like there's something for everyone to look up that information. And so if you really want to find us, do the work. Like it's really that easy. And if this was, 20 years ago, yeah, maybe, or maybe even 10 years ago, I guess even, I'll give you 2007, like iPhone, even if it was like before the iPhone, but now it's available. And all you really need to do is want to find artists of color, diverse artists. Yeah, I don't, that question of, upsets me because I don't sit around wondering, I just feel like it's just there, and you just really need to put in the work to do that research, and you'll find someone. And everything that you do, Asha, that you mentioned, I do when I'm looking for artists. Like if I'm just looking for people within my community, like even if you just do, I don't know, just anything, that just seems like a no-brainer. And maybe I'm not giving people credit, but I just feel like it's not that hard.
I just wanted to speak on that really quick. In my community, this thing has just recently popped up in the last like year or so that is blowing up, which is like lists of Black and brown photographers to hire from. And these lists have been made by Black and brown people. I'm surprised that people whose job it is to hire photographers hadn't thought of that, to make a list like that. And then it took the work again of Black and brown people making these lists for people with more power and privilege to then access those lists. So on one hand, it's really cool, and it's something I never thought I would have seen in my career, of like editors for places like the New York Times looking at a list first of who Black and brown, and I'm not saying for every story, but there are specific stories that you really can benefit from hiring someone within the culture. So anyway, there's new archives if anyone's interested, like Diversify Photo is one of them. Girl Gaze is another one, which is all like femme or gender non-conforming people like doing work, and yeah, Color Positive Photo, and then Authority Collective. These are all like the same kind of realm of like Black and brown and Indigenous people making art and banding together for visibility's sake. And it's really sad that it had to come to that, but I think that there's some cool things happening from it. So that's what's going on in my community with that.
I'd also like to add, I know I talked a lot already, but I'd like to add that we're doing the work, and it's not very much work on top of that to participate and find Black artists. Like, we're already painting and taking pictures and coming up with the art concepts and making the art. So if the part is just finding us, we're also, being on panels and making websites and making our Instagrams and Facebooks and whatever. So we're pushing out. You just also have to look out, because we're there. It takes everybody's work. If you want to be anti-racist, if you want to go, oh, hey, there's this thing I never heard of before. It's called anti-racism. How do I be a part of it as a white person? It's actually, this is something that you can try. It's literally just reaching out, because we will be part of the mainstream when the mainstream accepts us as part of it. And it doesn't seem like we are part of the mainstream when you have to look us up specifically, and it makes us feel a little bit ostracized in the moment. But actually, by looking us up and ostracizing us a little bit just to get us and pull us in, you're like, oh, I'm singling you out because you're not already standing here with me, but we're in this big mass land. I'm singling you out and pulling you in, and then we're all going to be in the same space. So you aren't going to have to look us up in 50 years. Don't worry about it. We'll be right there with you. But you have to kind of pull and yank a little bit if you want to be part of creating an anti-racist society. It's not just on us.
Yep.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like almost every like major city. So like look up the closest major city to you. And if you're adverse to major cities, maybe just Google your zip code and like what is going on for Black and Brown and Indigenous people in that zip code. Because I promise you, there is stuff, as we've been saying, already happening. And I feel like people are anyone who's adverse to, like we were saying, like feeling awkward about singling out and like seeking Black, Brown, and Indigenous art, like, trust me, the European art has had its time. We've given enough, like, we've done enough for it. It has its place in history. It's not going anywhere. So you might as well do the effort. I mean, I have worked on so many professional sets, film sets, commercial sets. We have Nordstrom, Amazon, all these big companies here. I've been to these places, media like hubs, like it is not diverse, from the director to the photographer to the person who's running and getting food. Like it's just really out of whack how like just like the lighter the shade you are, like the more likely you are to be in those positions. So it is really wild that it's the 21st century and that this is happening, but it's really cool that people are starting to feel like empowered to do something about it. So yeah, just like take it upon yourself right now. Take a moment and like Google, what is your local, like, is there an African American heritage project? Is there art being made from the African diaspora? What Indigenous land are you on? That's a great first step. Everyone's on Indigenous land. Why don't you just Google whose land you're on real quick? And what are they up to right now? I mean, just stuff like that, you know, it's just like little steps one at a time. And I promise you every year you'll just wake up to something new and it's exciting.
No, excellent. Definitely. I think sometimes that it's really hard, and you guys touched on this on other answers. I think sometimes, you know, Seattle really loves to think of itself as a really liberal and an inclusive city. And I think that it's really good for people to hear that maybe that there's a lot more work to be done, you know, that people need to be going out there and doing it. I was wondering if you might speak to any organizations or communities that you would like to give a shout out to Seattleites who might be watching this conversation.
Okay, I have a list going. Okay, I'm really enjoying Wanawari, which is an African diaspora like heritage museum and artist gallery. I really love Youth Speaks. They've been going for a long time, poetry for young people and a place to meet up for young people to go. The NAACP Youth Council is doing amazing work, so check out their work. The Everyday Marches, Morning March and Evening March, they've been marching for 160 days plus. And have just been educating completely peacefully and nonviolently. And I can unbiasedly attest to that. I've seen that with my own eyes. Yeah, who else? Oh, Duwamish Longhouse. They're trying to get a pathway to the Duwamish River. Their longhouse is near the river, but they don't have access to their historical like site to the actual water. So they need to get a walkway going. And yeah, that's you know, and El Centro de la Raza is another one, and WASIN, which is Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network. Those are just like off the top of my head. So, and RAMP.
I was just gonna shout out Art Vault Seattle because they're getting art supplies to Black artists and brown artists and POC artists in the Seattle area. And the folks who run that are great people who make awesome art too. So donate to them if you want. They're great to donate to. Art supplies, money. That's what they need, right?
Yeah, Chloe, you touched on a lot of the ones that were in my head, but I guess other ones would be Onyx Gallery. They're located in the Pacific Mall. I don't know how long they've been around, but they show art from the African diaspora. So definitely give them a shout out. I am giving them a shout out. Give them a look at. They're currently open. So, you can go at, limited capacity and check them out. There is a new tiny art space called the Julian Pena Gallery. It just opened this year, and his mission is to showcase underrepresented art. They have a new exhibit opening called Feast and Famine. And so, probably by the time this shows, it's gone, but, check them out. Geez, who else? Art Parlor. Art Parlor, they tend to do a lot of artist interviews. They did one recently over Zoom. So they post them on Instagram and do Instagram Live, but then they also do like longer panels like this over Zoom. So make sure you check them out on Instagram. And I think they have a Facebook page as well. Yeah, probably more will come to me, but those, you touched on a lot of the ones that I was going to say, so yeah.
I have one more that I just was doing research on last night. The Williams family Carvers. So John T. Williams was killed by a Seattle police officer 10 years ago in 2010. His family has the Williams family. Their website is williamsfamilycarvers.com. They are an indigenous family who do traditional indigenous carving. They make walking sticks, totems, small to large. They did a huge peace totem that was up in the chop zone. Anyway, their family has been carving like down at the Ye Olde Curiosity Shop for like 100 years, and they've been at the Pike Place Market since they've opened. I personally have one of their walking sticks. I highly recommend. And if anyone's interested in just like the idea behind indigenous art and woodwork, I wasn't educated on wood carving and its connection to indigenous cultures. So Williams family carvers are so talented. Go get a walking stick.
On that note, definitely Real Rent Duwamish is another one to check out. I think that for a younger generation, that it's really easy for us to know how to go about looking up and understanding people's stories. For people who have maybe less technological affiliations and other things like that, like how best can they go about helping perpetuate representation in art, do you think? Like how can they get your message and your story out there when it's not their story to tell?
Mm-hmm. I feel like one part of that is like we are in the age of COVID right now. Like the baseline is how do you build community, period. Like is your version of building community like around music and y'all like to maybe you have a book club, or maybe you share recipes, or maybe you like photography. So like figure out what your thing is that brings your community together, and then incorporate anti-racism into that. That if you like recipes and you share a recipe with your grandma every week, share a share an African diaspora recipe with your grandma and be like, hey grandma, shout out this African, culture that brought this upon us. So bringing in anti-racism to your everyday community is a great thing. And then also, I can't recommend this enough. Have conversations and relationships with people 20 years above and 20 years below in age. I learned so much from speaking to my elders, and I learned so much from working with the youth. And it just like if you have all friends that are all white, you need to mix it up, honey. And if you have all friends that are all in your generation, it's time to mix it up. So be in dialogue with people, if not in other communities, at least in other generations.
I second that a bit. The intergenerational communication and community is everything. And even, if you have a grandkid, start a conversation with your grandkid. If you've never thought about, I keep trying to go to this idea of like, if you've never ever thought about racism before, or you've never felt like you could make an impact in changing racism, you're like, I know it exists, but what can I do myself? Taking the time to notice it in everything And since we're talking about art in your media, when you're watching a movie, when you're listening to your favorite song, when you are reading books, who is creating your media? And once you start to realize that it all kind of looks the same, then take it the next step and go, how do I change what I'm looking at? And that is through intergenerational relationships. You can ask, can you help me find things? You can go, I know libraries are super limited right now, but if you can make a trip to the library, librarians are great help in answering some of these questions. I love libraries. Even just if you can get to the catalog on your computer of the Seattle Public Library or whatever your local library is, like looking up even just like Black books, then you can start to learn, because, you know, history, it's like learning a whole new history that was not given to us in the mainstream in schools growing up. And so just to note, taking that first step is noticing, and you actually are making a difference by noticing, because it is this whole, it goes back to this idea of validation, and if your art can be validating, then also being recognizing that people have different experiences as you can be validating. And it is really the first step towards, you know, eventually you can get to the hashtags, you can get to like, oh, Black art in my area. But if you just need to like, first, it's just this, I'm looking around myself. What do the paintings in my house look like? If I do have, you know, lots of African art in my house, did I get it on a trip I took in self-discovery when I was 20? Or did I get it from people who are local and around me? First think, what do I have in my house? What am I looking at every day? And then think how much of this is local. And then think how much of this, on top of being local, or think, you know, one or the other, is made by brown people who are also being credited for this work. And that is just basic first steps. And it makes it a lot easier to swallow when you're, you know, trying to get the bigger stuff.
Yeah, I love the idea of food. I think food is a big one, you know, especially now if you're trying to support local, find out what in your neighborhood is owned by, you know, brown and Black people. I know for a while there, DoorDash was highlighting, you know, immigrant-owned restaurants, you know, in Seattle. And so, you know, I think food is a big one. I also, you know, there's like NPR. So NPR has, if you listen to NPR out there, Latino USA, part of NPR, like there's radio programming out there that can, you know, give you something different to listen to, you know, a different viewpoint to listen to. You know, I find international news, you know, really, you know, important too, like figuring out what's going on, you know, in other countries. And that gives you a greater lens and that gives you empathy. I think a lot of it is empathy, you know, like find other things that you can relate to in people that look different than you. And I think food is a big one. Music is another one. You know, I love, I know I keep talking about being Puerto Rican, but it's just a big thing for me. You know, I love that our music has African roots. I love that. And so that takes me back to PR, and that takes me back to those cultures. And so like finding out, you know, what kind of music you listen to, who are those artists, you know, who inspired them, and goes back to, you know, I know we did, you know, we're trying to stay away from the hashtags and stuff, but find out who Black and brown people are listening to and follow them, and that will just keep taking you. And I think NPR is a great one. Podcasts, you know, I'm pretty sure you can, some podcasts have websites, you know, you can go on a website and listen that way. Also a lot of museums, you know, that are focusing on the diaspora or just like one particular culture. A lot of them are now getting used to this environment and are having, you know, Zoom panels and Zoom talks, and they're free. So that's another great way that, you know, you can go on their website, and or some of them do Facebook Live. You can watch these from home, and, you know, if you're already a member of a museum, then find out what their programming is, and does any of that programming tie to being anti-racist? And, you know, watch that. I think there are a lot of ways other than social media or just for you to be anti-racist. Book clubs are another one. I know a lot of librarians have out their book lists, their recommended lists to read. So, I know it's hard to get to the library, but if you do have a smartphone, the Libby app is there. There are audiobooks. I love the Libby app. But yeah, there are a lot of ways that you can diversify your experience.
One thing I've been trying to do is if I am interested, or if I only have a one-dimensional understanding of a culture, I try to think of how I can bridge it to a more dimensional understanding. So for example, like there's a culture, like I feel like food, again, such a good entry point into other cultures. Like if you love Latin food, if you love Mexican food, and you don't know nothing about like their heritage or the history of Mexico, or maybe you don't know about Mexican music, like why don't you take it to another place, right? Or you really like a certain kind of music, figure out what kind of religion they have in that area or something like that, like cross-reference your interests a little bit. And I feel like, whether it's food, music, dance, try to diversify what interests you about that culture, because that challenges stereotypes, right?
And I think to add to that, I think another important thing is, can you reflect on how many times you had to learn something different? I think about, Black and brown people, newly immigrants, like our lives have been, I'll speak only for myself, assimilation, assimilate, and like be part of the bigger, make yourself more white, essentially, and you will be accepted, and you assimilate, and then you blend in, and then whatever, right? And like obviously some folks like myself who are a little more light skinned can do that, a little bit more. But I think for people, as a person who, if you are white, think about when was the last time that you actually had to assimilate to anything, and if the answer is, oh, I've never had to do that, well then you you need to start doing that, because it's not good to live in your bubble. It's not good to, you won't, I don't know, that's so limitless to me, to never have to like see anything different. So yeah, just ask yourself, like, have I ever had to assimilate to something before? And if that answer is no, then maybe you need to figure out like, what can you do to learn something a little bit more? Put yourself in their shoes, in our shoes, and think about how some music that was popular in some culture wasn't popular until it was taken and reformatted and packaged to be a certain way. Like instead of starting from there, go back, and see where it got its inspiration from.
Miles and I, as you can see or probably guess, are, very white, mostly cis people.
What?
Okay, well, Miles is definitely cis. I'm at least somewhat cis. But, what are the questions we're not asking? We're very grateful to be asked to be conducting these interviews, but it's specifically because we put on a very diverse art show at McCaw Hall. And I feel like there are definitely questions or things that we should be asking that we might not be even considering. What are some of the questions maybe we should be asking? What are some of the things you'd like to say?
I don't know exactly who all was supposed to be here for the panel today, and I don't know what all the private interviews look like. I was super duper grateful to be reached out to for this project. Perhaps in the earlier stages, asking for suggestions of who we may know. I've noticed all of us are at least a little bit like not black passing, or like, you know, there is a crowd that will call us not black, and having a dark skinned sister up here would be nice. Having like a black man in our group, in our midst, like cis black man in our midst, could be a really, really great thing, and could answer questions and have a different view or opinion than any of us. I know that we all got our black spicy, but someone who has a very like, it's different. It's different because even within the brown community and the black community, there's colorism and featureism, and it gives us all a different view. And so if just asking those questions early on, because generally, you know, the more you ask, the more likely you get a wider variety of people.
I agree 100%. I also, I don't know who's supposed to be here, but I absolutely agree. I'm glad you brought that up, Asha, because it is a different experience, you know, and I'm kind of sad that the other folks aren't here, so we could at least meet them. But if I think of something else, I'll speak to that.
I just think it's so important to withhold judgment on stuff because we don't know what people have been through. And, you know, there's this sentiment that I keep hearing online that's like, maybe don't tell Black and brown people how to feel, how to protest, how to grieve, how to deal with trauma. So if you're having a feeling, an aversion to the protests, maybe just question, educate yourself on the groups who are protesting, especially if you're feeling, if you're coming up against the uprisings and feeling kind of, I don't know, any kind of way about it. I would encourage yourself to like watch the live streams of what's going on in your closest town and what the uprisings are doing, because we're in a very interesting time in history, and I think no matter what side you are on, being informed right now is so important. So good. I don't know if that definitely doesn't answer the question, but yeah, what I just want to keep bringing it back to Indigenous communities. Like I love Seattle. We're in such a cool city, but this city was named for Chief Seattle, and we need to remember that every day. And like, if you're living in this city and you're not doing anything for Indigenous lives, like, I just don't know. It's a reckoning time right now. So what Sydney said about the Real Rent campaign, I think that is I think every single person who lives in King County should be thinking about paying real rent to the Duwamish tribe. Yeah, we don't have to get into it. You can just go to the website and educate yourself on what real rent is. But I think everyone, and if not you, like your employer, maybe your parents have a little bit more money than you, maybe your siblings doing better off than you are, like someone in your community, get them on board with paying real rent for being on Indigenous land, basically, especially in Seattle.
We got to get them federally recognized as well, so help them out.
Facts.
Yeah. I have one last remark. It is, if you are scared of the internet and you're not using it, but you want to know what you can do, the first step that you really can take is become a little bit more comfortable with the internet, because it's quarantine and it's COVID and we have to stay home. And if you're not using the internet, you're probably home a lot to be safe still anyway, and you can learn a lot. NPR is great. The radio is great. Listening to the afternoon show on KEXP will get you some more Black music than you may get any other part of the day on KEXP. I love the whole day on KEXP, but still listen to the afternoon show with what Mizell Jr. is I can't remember his first name. He's great. Larry Mizell Jr. Oh my gosh. He's the new afternoon show guy if the radio is less scary than the internet. But seriously, you want to be an advocate, get on the internet, because you can learn more while the libraries are closed, while you can't go outside, while you can't be going to fancy restaurants to learn what fancy people are eating. You got to go on the internet. It sucks, but it's true. We don't like it either. Or some of us do. I'm only speaking for myself. I have a hard time with the internet, but you can still find me at Artsy Asha because I'm still doing the internet. So you can too, and you can be an advocate.
Yeah, I was just gonna plug myself too. Like, you can follow me at Chloetry on Instagram, on all social media platforms. I'm at Chloetry, and I'm trying my best to cover local events with a local eye, unbiased, and like specifically the grassroots movements that are going on. So yeah, back to like what Asha was saying about feeling, maybe if you're feeling disconnected, you know, sometimes the very least you can do is follow some of the journalists or people or family or friends that are on the ground, just to be educated on what's going on. And as a local journalist, I'm always open for pitches. If someone feels like they have a story in the Seattle community that isn't being told, like, I would love to work with you on getting that story told. So
love to talk to you in a little bit. Yes.
Yeah, I'll plug myself as well. You can find me at Shami Fern Gully. That's ShamiFernGully. I also curate artwork for Sassafras, which is a local fashion boutique in Belltown. Everything's been digital, so it's at Sassafras. I think it's _ Seattle. I should probably know that. It is, thanks. The website is sassafras-Seattle, so like I tend to mix those two up. So thank you for checking me on that. Yeah, like get on the internet. Just do it.
Worth it.
It's yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, right?
That on too. We're not saying it's all golden. Sometimes you'll read something on the internet and it sucks. But also there are good places like artsyasha.com, and then what are you going to do? You have to go there.
Or ShamikaLovesInc.com.
ShamikaLovesInc.com.
But also on the vein of some stuff sucks. Also check your resources. So if you are on a website and you're like, that seems out of, crazy, like that just seems like ridiculous. We'll see where that person is getting their information from. Usually if it's a good place, there are sources there. There are links that you can click on that they tell you where they got the information from. So also, if you're going to be on the internet, be what's the word I'm looking for? Accountable for what you are looking at and what you're taking in, and make sure that, it's not conspiracy or it's not like, whatever. Just be mindful while you're on the internet and know where their sources are coming from. If it's not something you've visited before or never heard of before, I think part of being on the internet and educating yourself is to understand where you're getting your information from, and you can't take everything at face value. Dig a little deeper.
Yeah, do y'all use Snopes.com? Am I the only one like Snopesing everything?
I love Snopes.
Oh my Lord, I Snopes everything. Like if someone's like, did y'all know the moon is made of cheese? I'm like, Snopes.com. That's Nopes with an S in front of it. Snopes. And I just Google whatever someone is talking about, or sorry, Snopes it. And Snopes always has the answer and verifiable links. So cannot plug them enough. Check your facts.
Well, I feel a little bit bad because I was told that this interview needs to be kept to about an hour, which I think we probably went over. But that's a good thing because I learned a lot. I am so thankful that you guys came here and were willing to talk about this stuff. I'm not gonna say it's a treat. It was a privilege to be able to listen to it. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, to know more about these awesome artists, again, we have individual interviews with each of them: Asha, Shamika, Chloe, and also with Roshana and Rosa, who are not here today, but who are incredible artists and have a lot of really interesting and very thoughtful opinions that you're definitely going to want to hear. So definitely check out SeaPertls.com or look for the truncated interviews on pnb.com. So thank you so much for being with us here tonight, and we love you.
Thank you,
All right,
guys.
guys, have a great night.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.